without much further ado, I'm going to pass straight over to Ben and Gareth from Hijinks Theatre. Over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Hello, as Paul said, my name is Ben, and I'm Artistic Director at Hijinks. Gareth, do you want to say hello?
Hello, my name's Gareth, and I'm one of the actors from Hijinks in the Academy West.
Thank you for having us today. I do have a presentation to go through that gives a bit of background information on who Hijinks is. But I've kind of chosen to approach it from using some of our productions as examples of things that we've had to consider in the making of our shows. It's interesting to think about this as a company that's for whom all of our productions involve artists who have a learning disability or are neurodivergent, because it's always there in terms of being part of the process throughout. And so to actually unpick what exactly it is we do in terms of making our productions accessible for that audience, in part, it is the involvement of that audience in the making of our shows, if that makes sense, which informs what that show will become, which means that it's always part of because people that make our shows are learning disabled and or neurodivergent, it's those particular people that informs what sort of access that show may need, because they have to be comfortable in the performing of that show. So I've kind of got some examples of what that means for us, because not all of our shows would be described as being appropriate for everyone. We don't necessarily do many relaxed performances for that reason. But there are certainly elements which run across all our shows which help. But let's go into a bit of background. So I'll start my presentation because I've started talking now and all I'm doing is jabbering. So I'm going to share screen. Oh, bear with me. Which one is it? That one. Start from the beginning. That is not the beginning. Apologies. Go back through. I'm going to stop and start again. Sorry, because we tested it out. I'm now in the wrong place. Great. Let's try again. Right. I'll assume everyone can see that. Please shout if you can, because I can't see you now. But yes, we are Hijinks, and we are a bold, pioneering theatre company working in Wales and across the globe. Currently, we train 70 artists with learning disability and or neurodivergent in 5 academies across Wales. We tour the globe with our street theatre and theatre shows in which Hijinks actors create and perform alongside non-disabled artists. In 2012, we introduced what we call our academies. So our academies are sort of professional standard training for artists with learning disability and or autism. Gareth is a member of our academy in West Wales. I wonder, Gareth, would you like to describe a little about what that involves?
Yeah, okay. Basically, through 2 days of the week before the pandemic, we would be in our academy in the part of that we were in, and we would, through the 2 days of the week, we would split off our days and get certain different acting techniques. I'll give you just 2 or 3 examples. Like on every morning we would start a workout to get ourselves warmed up and like work up our strength and work on our health, and that was our morning. But in the day we work on acting techniques, like for example, on a Thursday morning, someone who's an experienced theatre worker would come in and look at us on vocal projection, how to study different parts of theatre, how to work with other people, how to warm up your vocals and work on voice and projection. And then on a Thursday, on an afternoon, someone who's an experienced film actor would come in and tell us how to act on camera, how to work with the camera, how to be comfortable on set, and how you work with that and aspects. And then one more thing is someone on Friday would come in and tell us improvise acting, how to work on the spot without reading the script. Or
Right.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So yes, so there's a variety of different skills that different tutors teach on our academies. Each week our artists receive professional training in a wide range of performance skills, as Gareth was describing there. And additional to those which Gareth described, we also train in ensemble, circus, mask work occasionally, improvisation. The list is somewhat endless, but the concept is that these are all skills that are important for our artists to work professionally in the industry and also in the production of our own shows and development of our own shows. So we started with one academy in Cardiff. We now have 5 around Wales, 2 in Cardiff, 1 in Carmarthen, 1 in Aberystwyth, and 1 in Prestatyn. The academy courses are designed to prepare our artists for employment as professional performers, both with Hijinks and externally. I've already said that. And yes, as Gareth was describing, the tutors cover a range of different skills, whatever their specialism may be. So that might be as actors, directors, they work as actors, directors, choreographers, puppeteers, clowns, and dancers. What was interesting for me, and the reason I guess that I'm sharing this information about the academy, is because it's important for us, because everything that we do at Hijinks runs through our academies. So the making of our productions, it always starts with working with our artists on the academies. And it informs generally a huge amount of what we do as an organization. But in connection with access, I guess what's been interesting for me in thinking about this is how that the academies also inform our approach to access in some ways in our productions. So I just have a kind of some examples here of things that we think about in terms of access on our training. So communication, we're very careful to be very clear about who the academies are for. So therefore adults who have the potential to work within the wider industry and at Hijinks as a professional performer or deviser, theatre maker, whatever that might be. So in that, there's a general level of independence that is necessary, so that we don't, on the academies, the participants don't have one-on-one support in the room, is one factor. We do also run other courses that are for individuals that might want to access drama as a way to building their confidence, to increase social skills. And for those courses, one-on-one support is possible, but they're not as, I guess, rigorous or demanding as the training that we offer on Academy. Group size. So the max group size that we have in a room, or the ideal, is 12. We've actually gone up to 15 recently, but that feels too big. So my recommendation would be to keep a group size fairly small. Facilities, and I think I wrote this because I've been involved in too many projects where, you know, participants have a dusty, cold village hall somewhere, and it's just not fit for purpose for a working space. I think the quality of the space you're working in speaks on how much the work is valued. Who do we have in the room? So usually there's one tutor, one assistant facilitator, and usually one or two volunteers. So the tutor is there to teach, the assistant facilitator is there for any support that the artist may need to take that pressure off the tutor. And the volunteers are there to participate and enable the artist to participate within exercises. Everyone joins in the session, so we don't have people sitting out. If you're in the room, then you're part of the activity. And I've put here creating a family, because what we try to do is, and this is very much how we create our productions, is the artists that are involved in our productions have developed an ongoing relationship through their training on academies. And that goes for both our tutors, who in the main are non-disabled, and our artists. They will have built up a working relationship through that training over a number of years, which they then take with them into the making of our productions, so that there's a very clear understanding and trust that is already there. And I kind of include that as part of our approach to access, because I think it is about having a real familiarity with each other, enabled us to make the work that we make. I will go to the next slide. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some examples of our productions and some things that we had to think about as we were making them in connection to different access issues for the audience we're talking about today. So this production was Into the Light, that we made with Frantic Assembly in 2019. I'm going to show you a video because I find that's the easiest way for you to get a concept of the type of production it was. Okay. Great, I'll stop there. So this production, Into the Light, was all about stepping in and out of the light. Darkness was very important to achieve that effect. So therefore, we had to present it in very dark spaces, dark theatres. So it's not a production that we could ever describe as a relaxed performance, because one of the requirements for that would be that you would have low-level light in the auditorium. However, there are, for all of our productions, our expectation is that people are, you know, it's expected that people are able to move around as they wish and enter or leave theatre at any point, which was true of this as well. There was one particular consideration in this production because of its use of light and pulsing light. So there was one moment in rehearsals where we were experimenting with the possibilities with the neon on the edges of these frames, and there was a way that that looked fabulous, that the neon was able to pulse around the frame. And there was a moment where the potential was that could be included in the show, but because of our, obviously, experience and some knowledge in the team around frequencies that have the potential to trigger epileptic fits, the frequency of the particular light pulsing that the director was interested in using just happened to be a perfect match for the frequency that could potentially trigger epilepsy in some light sensitive epileptic cases. So of course that was something that we couldn't include in, that we had to change, which actually didn't even get considered once we discovered that. So I guess what I'm trying to kind of put across is that those conversations about who this is appropriate for and what the effects of what we're doing within the performance may have on an audience are ongoing and constant through the process. Because we had that in mind at that moment, that we were exploring that particular lighting effect, then that was something we saw, and that was something that we recognized could not be presented for the risk factor involved. However, like as I said, it certainly was not a relaxed performance. There were elements in there that we were aware that could be uncomfortable for some audience members. So what we ensured was that there was always very clear communication in our marketing of the nature of the show, and also clear signage at the venues that we performed, that there would be darkness in the space. There were no flashing lights, but there were bright lights and smoke effects. So signs were visible, clearly visible around the auditoriums to give people that kind of warning previous to entering the show. The next production I'm going to talk about is our collaboration with Blind Summit, so Meet Fred. I'm going to just show you the trailer again so that you get an idea of the type of show this is. Just a warning that there is some bad language, although in the trailer it has been beeped out, but that's something I'm going to discuss afterwards.
So, I'm a puppet called Fred, and this is a show about me.
Yeah. What do you want to be?
I mean, I guess I just want to be like everyone else. I just want to be a regular guy.
Where do you want to start?
This is a barrel. I'm Fred, you're a Jack, you massive bastard!
Excuses are the nails used to make a house a failure.
Martin! No. I don't actually like kids. If there was one here now, right, I'd hit it in the face with a stick with on it.
Don't blame me, Fred. Blame the system. Bye-bye.
Yeah, but I don't need you. I don't need anyone.
Right! What are you, pussy? Be a pussy!
I feel like I've been stitched up.
Okay, let me stop that there. So Meet Fred, yes. So as you probably hear, there was.
We're
Hello?
just going to switch interpreters now.
Okay. Will you let me know when you switched?
Okay.
Could you just, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you come out of sharing, because I can't pin the other interpreter until you come out of sharing. Thank you. Pinned, thank you.
Great. I can speak without sharing for a moment, maybe. You can see everyone's faces then. It's lovely. Yes, meet Fred. So as you probably saw from the clip, there was some strong language in this show. Mm-hmm. And we know as an organisation that many of our artists don't like strong language. That said, some are comfortable with that language, because I think there's a danger of generalisation of audiences that is to be avoided. So what I mean, we're always very careful to consider the use of that language. Is it necessary? Is it not? And that's something that there was very much at the forefront of our thoughts as we developed the show. But remember, but that show, what's important for me is that the artists that develop the show and perform the show are comfortable with the material that they are performing. And as long as everyone in the show is comfortable, what our job then becomes is how we communicate that. So how we ensure that we are very clear that this show will have bad language, will have adult themes, and will, you know, involve moments of tension, of heightened emotion, that are all elements that you wouldn't necessarily include as part of a relaxed performance. We actually had quite a discussion with one venue who wanted to program Meet Fred as a relaxed performance, and invite people from local groups to the venue. And we said, yes, of course, you know, we could do the show with light up in the auditorium, with people able to sit where they like. And we expect that people are able to move around the theatre, and that's all fine. We can put all of that in place, but actually the content of the show would have made it inappropriate for some of that audience. So we chose in the end that we weren't able to present that as a relaxed performance for that particular audience for those reasons. So although you may be able to put in lots of kind of things in place that can help the surroundings that the show will be presented in, it's also what the actual material is of that show that you need to consider. And if the show is for an adult, does have adult themes, does have heightened tension, does have bad language, as Meet Fred does, then you have to be careful about how you communicate that, or ensure that you do communicate that effectively.
Then, could I just jump in and, just in case anybody doesn't know, ask what a relaxed performance usually means, for what sort of the parameters of that are?
Yes, so I mean, a relaxed performance would normally involve all of those things which I just mentioned. So to present a performance that may have the sound dropped to a lower level, for example, that may have the lights on in the auditorium so that people can see and you're not in a dark space, that has allowances for people to be able to move as they wish around the space, to come in and out of the auditorium, to make noise in the auditorium. All of those sorts of factors are elements that people would normally consider as part of a relaxed performance. And often you get, you know, quite shows, for example, mainstream shows that would hold a couple of relaxed performances as part of their run, and put in place all of those elements for that audience. Okay, I'll move on to our next example production. I'm going to share screen again. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, good. So I hope everyone can see that. Do shout out if you can't. So this is a completely different type of production. This was a show called Mission Control, which was a large-scale immersive site-specific show that took place at the Wales Millennium Centre, not the Wales Millennium Centre, the Principality Stadium in Cardiff, and involved over 80 performers, 70 of whom were our own artists from academies. I will show you a clip. I'm not going to show the full clip because it's about, it doesn't seem to want to go to the next page from it. It's about 5 minutes in length. So I'm going to show you a couple of minutes. Just a quick caveat that unfortunately there are no captions on this clip because it's not finished yet. So it's not got to the point in the edits that the captions will be added. It's not public. So you're the first people to see this clip.
Make some noise!
Don't look at me, please. Just keep having a good time. Don't look at me. There's a new planet in the sky. It's not in the sky, it's in space. But what is space but enhanced sky?
It is not, I repeat, not a Tic Tac.
Sorry, what are you doing out here? You know, I'm gonna need you in, quickly. In you get, so you can't be out here. Yeah, sorry. Who said to
What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here! Get out! Out! Oh, no, you.
That there and talk a little bit about this show. So this, as I said, was an immersive experience. Up to 200 audience members took a journey through the stadium for each show. It had the potential as a production, although there are elements that are great in terms of for our audiences, because it's very interactive, it's very sensory in some ways, but also it has the potential for an overload of senses, and there's elements that maybe could scare people. So one thing that we did in connection with this production is made sure that we had a safe space, a quiet space, that the audience were made aware of, that they could go to in that place or be led to. So that in the case that someone did become panicked, then there was that space to sort of retreat to if overwhelmed. And I think that's something certainly worth considering for a production that may have the potential of creating a sensory kind of overload. So yeah, just I've kind of as an example from that particular. I also just wanted to mention a production that we've made during this pandemic, which was presented live online to audiences in their own homes, which we're actually presenting as part of the Edinburgh Fringe this year at the end of August. And what the potential that this opens up for an extra level of access, if you like, for our audiences, which we are continuing to explore, about the potential of being able to present work both, yes, in a theatre, but also stream it to people in their own homes. And there certainly seems to be a real appetite for this among the disabled audiences, or audience with disability, you know, that find it difficult to access a physical venue. And it's something we're very keen to see continue in all of our work. So some tips from those examples. So access as an ongoing process. So make sure that it's always part of the discussion from beginning to end, an ongoing conversation. There's also the potential, and it's something that we do, is hold kind of invited audiences, scratch performances, on work in progress performances, and to those performances we would invite members of our academies to gauge their reaction. And that's something certainly any company producing work is able to do. We also at that time invite both visually impaired and deaf consultants to advise us on that side of access as well. Challenging elements. So as in the example of Meet Fred, is it okay to say the F word? And in our opinion, yes. Is it possible to include challenging elements within your work? What becomes important is how you communicate that, so that you ensure it is clearly signposted, clearly referred to in your marketing, so that the audience can make a choice, just like any other audience makes a choice. Beware trigger effects. So there are some elements that we just don't include in our shows, things like flashing lights. We're quite careful with smoke effects, but if there are elements that we know will be challenging, you know, loud bangs, etc., then we make sure that there's clear signage available on display around the venues that we perform in, which is the next point. Communication and signage is key. Forget the fourth wall. So this was most of our shows, all of our shows, in fact, you know, in the main are we acknowledge the audience. Yeah, so there's the possibility for moments to appear from the audience and be responded to on stage. And I think that's kind of conceptually part of what makes our work more accessible as well, because it allows for those, you know, for an audience to be more relaxed in moving around or making noise, etc., in some ways, because the performers are relaxed about that as well. So immersive productions, yes. So just as make sure that you have a quiet space that people can access if needed. And then the final point is our intention to continue to explore the digital and the hybrid potential for access. So there we are. That is the end of my presentation. Let me now stop that. And Gareth, hello.
Hello.
We had a little chat earlier, didn't we? What's your take on some of what I've just said? Well, I mean, which you were involved in the production Mission Control.
Yeah.
What was that like to be part of as a performer?
It was an amazing experience. Very different to the sort of theatre that I usually have had, but it was a really good way of not just acting with your members, but getting to interact with the audience. And one fun thing that I think I got a lot out of was getting the audience to join in some of the stuff that we did. Was very entertaining, and seeing how, I mean, example, I did some stuff with them, like said, just copy what I'm doing. So I would do something really dramatic and crazy, and they would interpret it and make it their own. Well, I think a lot of them just were a bit like, what the heck is this guy saying or doing? And then they would follow it anyway. And then I was like, come on, make it bigger. And then they would go crazy. It was a lot of fun. But the show itself was just amazing because I got to act with people who I haven't usually worked with. As Ben has explained, there were, because we have other academies dotted around Wales, got to act with some people from the other academies as well, which brought us all together, and I've actually made some friends in the other academies dotted around Wales. So.
What do you think the experience was like for the audiences that came to Mission Control, Gareth?
Well, there's mixed feelings, obviously, I think. I mean, some people, like my family members and friends, have all really enjoyed it. There was nothing like they've seen before. They loved it all the same, but there might have been the odd occasion where somebody or someone was nervous about something that was happening, or some person didn't know what was going on. So no one actually came up to me and said, I don't like this.
Mm-hmm.
Although there was one person who said something, but she wasn't nervous about what was going on. She just needed the toilet, so I couldn't find it. But that's another story. But no one really actually came up to me and said, "Oh, I don't like this. Get me out of here." Everyone seemed to, like, let's say, add to it and take part in it, and just said, let's just go with it and see what happens. And then obviously everybody everyone seemed to appreciate it in their own certain way. As some people would say, I loved it. Some people would say, I wouldn't choose to see this show, but I enjoyed it. And some people would say, I personally wouldn't have enjoyed it, but I can see why it's a good show. So I think people have mixed opinions on it, but as an actor, I loved it altogether, and I'd love to do it again.
I think that's great, because what's interesting is there's a line, isn't there? Where does something fall under taste, what you like and don't like, and where does something fall under, okay, that for me, I can't access that because of this. That's the kind of, and for us as a company, we're happy to make work that maybe not everyone will like. That's okay. Maybe not all of our work has to be for absolutely everyone, because some people like one thing and some people don't like another thing. But we have to do our best to at least ensure that everyone who is able to access it, if they make the decision that that's something they're going to like or something they're not going to like.
Yeah.
Because, and that's important, because actually as an organisation, we want to make work that's edgy, and if something's edgy, it's not necessarily that everyone's going to like that. Gareth, I wanted to talk to you as well, because you were about the project that we were involved with National Youth Arts Wales, because this was a progression from what we did with Metamorphosis and the online digital production. Do you want to describe what that was about?
Yeah. Well, we designed a show that could be shown to a smaller audience, as in, like, considering because of the pandemic and we can't put it on a big stage because of the circumstances. So we designed a way to perform it to a small audience, as in one family member, and then somehow connect it to a shared audience by the internet and on Zoom, so they can watch. So they don't have to come to us to see it. They can see it at home or online or somewhere where they've got network. And it was really a way to show them how we do that, how we can do a show by doing that and show it to them. And that was a very enjoyable and positive experience of, you know, a different way of doing a show, but still it was amazing. And I just want to add one more thing. I got a hand to our technician people, because they did outstanding and amazing job of connecting all like the friends who were watching it at home or had it on their digital devices, connecting it to the cameras we had in the studio, and where we were able to express our show. So big hand to them, and it was great to be able to work with not just my academy, but some of the people we had, you know, from the what benefit the National Youth Theatre of Wales. So, and they were all very brilliant to work with.
We're very excited about the potential for being able to hold performances that won't just be live. This was kind of our first step in that direction, that will be able to be presented live for people who are able to make it to the theatre, and live at home for people who aren't able to make it to the theatre. And that's going to be something I think that becomes really important in terms of access in the times that we are currently living, because the likelihood seems to be that although the world opens up very quickly, there will be some people who are left behind. And that's what we're trying to avoid. But there is a real appetite for people to be able to access the work that theatre companies make from their own homes. And I think it is an access issue for many people. So it's something that we're going to continue exploring it and continue trying to do that. And I would love the rest of the industry to do the same. We are around about on our time of 22 minutes past, according to my clock. So I'm going to wrap it up there and allow people, I'll hand back over to you, Paul.
Yeah, great. Could, without delving too much into the Q&A, because we'll come to some of these later, but could I just ask a question on, a lot of what you sort of spoke about was communicating in the right way. So you would talk about how shows often don't work for everyone and you can't make it a relaxed performance. So I was wondering, both Ben, what strategies Hijinks put in place, and also Gareth, what do you think is really useful when you go to experience culture that people communicate with you for your particular requirements? Is there any sort of examples where you've gone to see a show where it's not been well communicated, or it's been particularly well communicated? I think that'd just be really good to hear what those are.
Okay, well, not if I can just get clear to understand, do you mean like how we communicate with people, or?
I think for you, Gareth, because also what everyone won't be aware of is you do work as well at an art centre at Pontardawe.
Yeah.
Art centre as a volunteer usher. So actually, you're in a great position to think about what shows have you seen that communicated well what the content of that show would be, or what shows maybe didn't communicate so well and you were shocked by the content of that show.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I explained earlier to Ben, if you don't mind me saying, I've seen many shows in my time of things, and there are a few shows where have been, I said to Ben, were shocking by some of the context in it. Language barrier was a huge thing, because I saw a show where there were lots of adult humor in it, and language was a big thing in it, and I personally not a big fan of the language, but I'm someone that can handle the language barrier. But and even though the audience went with it, which I think was great, because the last thing you want is someone making a scene or complaint. I was kind of a bit like, okay, I can handle this, but how is the audience going to interpret it?
And how would you have liked to have been informed of that before you entered the theatre?
I would have liked, well, I knew, well, when I came to this, when I was going to see the show, because as well as working it, I was informed beforehand there was going to be, I wasn't sure, because I had never seen a show like it before. I wasn't sure how big or how small the language, and unless it was rude, it was quite rude, how big and how small the things were going to be. So I went into the show with an open mind. I was informed that it is an adult show and this is how it's going to be presented and what it entails. So I went to the show with an open mind and thought, if you don't like it, just see the show. And I went to see the show, and I got to admit, I was a bit shocked by the adult and language humor and stuff in it. But on the other hand, I decided to go, well, I'm not personally going to say I enjoy this, but the audience are laughing their heads off because they obviously like to be humor. So, even though I was working there, I kind of thought, let's put my feelings aside, how I feel about language and stuff. So I just went along with the audience and had a blast. So I put what I feel about language and other things aside. I just went with the audience, and so I was aware of what was going on, but I just had to put my personal feelings aside and just have a good time. And I actually appreciated at the end. I was like, I put the language aside and maybe one or two other things. That was actually a really good show, and I totally enjoyed it. So.
I think for us at Hijinks, what's key is that we recognise elements of a show that we've created that we need to communicate to our audiences that they may find challenging.
Yeah, we have had a few moments.
So we make sure that that's part, of all of the marketing copy, that is very clear, that it's not just on the box office, this is, for 14 plus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But actually in the body of the copy, it includes strong language, tension, adult themes. And that's very clear for everyone to see. I mean, there's whole other elements of marketing and how you make your marketing more accessible to the audience we're talking about today, which I haven't really included in part of this presentation. But certainly, those key triggers and kind of information that we know that our own artists, some of whom find difficulty with, we make sure that they're sort of headlined.
I think a lot of our shows are adult humoured, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, we generally make shows for an adult audience, which means that they do include adult themes, because the shows, and partly that is because we like to surprise people. We like to change perceptions, and there is still to this day a lot of, you know, infantilization of the person,
and we have
the artists that we work with, and sometimes within their own family.
And we have
So,
people.
Yeah. It's very much a choice that we make work for adult audiences.
Fab. Can I, let's just wrap it up there just for the moment, because I'm aware Gloria's hands are falling off. She's been working very hard. So I think thanks so much, Ben and Gareth, for that. That's hugely interesting, and I'm sure we'll have loads more questions. We've already got some in the chat, which we'll come back to a little bit later on. But if we now take a 5-minute break, so if we come back at the precise time of 12:36, according to my clock, then we will go over to Open Theatre with Maddie and Luke. Great. So let's welcome to the stage, metaphorical stage, Maddie and Luke. Hello to you both, and thanks for joining us.
Hiya.
Hello, thanks for inviting us.
Quite all right. So Maddie and Luke are both associates working with Open Theatre, and they've come today for a chat which I'm going to sort of chair. But first, if I could just ask you both to introduce yourselves alongside your autistic superpower, your autism superpower, which I'm told is a term that I learned this week.
Yeah, sure. I'm Madeleine Levy, and the hat that I'm wearing, the metaphorical and physical hat, changes depending on which audience members I'm talking to. But for now, I'm an associate actor with Open Theatre. I'm on an internship with them for the next 8 weeks, which is really exciting. And I'm also a final year occupational therapy student, which is the arts and health side of what I do as well. And I'm aware that not everyone might know what an autistic superpower is. Paul, so I'll just explain that briefly. Basically, most neurodiverse people, you find that they will have a quality about them that they're like really, really good at or really, really passionate about. But it's not just what you're good at, it's something that you absolutely would not be able to do if you didn't have autism. So somebody who's not on the spectrum might be good at decorating, but that's not your neurotypical superpower. That's just that you're good at decorating. It's kind of the blessing and the curses of being on the spectrum, I guess. And my superpower is that I'm really empathic. So I can get on with almost anybody in any room I'd like to, and I know exactly what sort of person you are, whether you're an authentic or genuine or kind person, before you've even said anything, which some people really like and get on with, and other people are really put off by and don't want to talk to me. So yeah, over to you, Luke.
All right. Hi, I'm Luke. I'm an associate and actor with Open Theatre. I do many things. I'm also on Open Theatre's board. So I think my autistic superpower, funnily enough, and this wasn't planned, is actually very similar to Maddie's. I can be very empathic as well. I can get a sense of a person, even if they just walk past me, I can sort of get a sense of a vibe about who they are. I can walk into a room and sort of pinpoint different traits straight away personality trait straight away, which is, as I say, both a blessing and a curse sometimes. Another one I think that's a bit different is I have a very obscure memory. So I've got a bit of a photographic memory with specific things, but I also remember when I'm talking to people, I don't just remember what people have said, and I don't just remember necessarily how they've said it. I remember like very tiny little details. So like maybe like a tiny little grin that somebody might have quickly done, like a little twitch or something like that. A certain tone of voices I remember, and I remember like just the things you wouldn't normally think about. I remember. So yeah.
Great, thanks. And Gareth, I don't know, do you have a superpower?
Oh, me?
Yes.
I have
you're very good at learning scripts, which I'm jealous of.
Sorry?
I saw on your video you're very good at learning scripts, which I'm jealous of.
What do you mean?
Yeah, on your video on the Hijinks page, you said you're very good at learning scripts.
Well, it depends what you mean by learning scripts. I am actually revealed to in my way. I'm actually dyslexic.
Right.
And that's something that, you know, I mean, people pinpoint, but I couldn't care less because what I do, and people over the years through years have asked me, how do you do that? Like, I go on to that is what I do is my parents, who have been very supportive all through everything, you know, theatre-wise, is that they take the scripts off, well, they go through them with me, like, I know a few times, like, you know, 6 to 8 times, mainly just get me used to the readings and the words. And then what I can do by, since my autism superpower, is I can memorize that. And it's in my head. So I memorize these lines. And so when it comes to them, I have a script to just look back, just to recap, but I memorize these lines. And I think it's like, say I come to rehearsal like the fourth or fifth time in a rehearsal, I'm off script and I'm memorizing these lines and saying them and acting them, and people are just like, people who are still on script are going, how do you know these lines? Not only do I memorize my own, and I get annoyed by this, but I can't help but laugh. Not only do I memorize my lines, I can memorize some of their lines. And they're like, hang on, that's my line. And I was like, yeah, I know, but I need to know my cues as well. So I can memorize not only my own, but theirs as well. And they get quite annoyed, but it's funny.
I'm very jealous of that superpower. It takes me ages to learn a script, so I'm jealous of that one. Great. So, Madeleine and Luke, I guess just to shuffle up the order of the questions ever so slightly, it'd be good to talk with you about language, because that was something that came up in our meeting before, and the sort of complexity of learning difficulties, learning disabled, neurodivergent, autism. They're words that are together somehow, but I think there's a lot of confusion as to what they mean alongside each other, which it'd be really great to hear your thoughts on that and your perspective of that.
Yeah. Well, obviously, we'd need a whole other talk to go through what each word means, so I'm not going to do that here. But what I will say is that we're all, as artists and as people in society, we are all learning together all of the time. And I think with the language, like, language evolves as we evolve as well, and people forget that language is not static. it constantly changes. And I think as a community of creatives, we need to be able to work together and be able to say, you know, if something offends you, that's okay. I'm sorry, I didn't consider your point of view, to be able to then work on that and change your approach if it's offensive. But it's a bit like what Ben was saying, like sometimes not everyone is going to like or appreciate what you say. Like I got called up on it myself in my own work recently, because I'm writing a book on Asperger's and autism and how to support people through the education system. And the young person said to me, "We don't use the term Asperger's anymore. That term's gone." And I said, well, my justification for using it is because that's what I was diagnosed with in the 90s. And I'm sorry if it offends yourself. I will use high functioning autism when describing you personally, but I'm not going to stop saying that word because that is the diagnosis that I was given. And as long as you can justify your reasons behind what you're doing, I think you'll always be okay. And I think it's about what Ben said about like access being an ongoing process, and it's like a conversation right at the start of a production. If you want neurodiverse and people with and/or additional physical mental health needs to feel welcomed in your show, then that's the intent that you start with right at the beginning of the planning, right through to the final performance. Really. Do you want to say anything on that?
I think you've pretty much covered it. Yeah, see, I was diagnosed with Asperger's as well, but I, especially nowadays, I'll tell people that I've been diagnosed with Asperger's, but the reason why I personally prefer the term autism is not because like the term Asperger's offends me, it's because I feel like people think they know what Asperger's means, whereas autism is a little bit more ambiguous. So I'd rather I'd rather use that term so that people are unsure. I don't really know how to explain it, if that makes sense. Kind of, I feel like it may open people's minds a bit more. I don't know whether I'm making sense at all, sorry.
Do you mean that people have preconceived ideas of what they think Asperger's is, whereas autism is a bit more ambiguous?
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. I think.
Fab. And could we just get like a very, I know this is mega difficult, and you said you'd need a whole other session, which maybe we should arrange at some point, but if you could give like a sort of idea of what we mean by learning difficulties, what we mean by learning disabilities, and why autism is separate to that, just so people get the understanding of that, because I think you explained it really well when we met earlier in the week, which would just be really useful.
Yep. Sorry, I'll just put my health professional hat on 1 second. I think the language that we use derives from the medical model of disability a lot of the time, and the learning disabilities element of it is something that was created by health professionals in the 1980s, and they were looking at impairment and handicap, and the belief is that an individual with an impairment should be aiming past themselves, and that their impairment or handicap can be cured effectively. And I think the reason that it's not so great language now is because it's not inclusive of every type of audience member that you might cover like disability means that somebody is disabled in something. It means that they find something difficult, whereas for myself, I would say that I learn differently, but I don't find learning challenging because I've got a master's degree and I'm in the final year of a BSc right now. So it's kind of, my way of thinking might be different to yours, but I still arrive at the answer maybe 3 days later, but you know, I'll arrive at it at a different route kind of thing. Does that answer your question, Paul, or do you want me to elaborate?
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you use as what would you personally use as a term in place of those words, I guess? Is neurodivergent the answer?
Well, what I would suggest to any artist or anybody is it's about making people feel welcome, and it's about making people feel positive and have a good experience in your environment. And the way to do that is to focus on their strengths or their superpowers rather than what they can't do or their deficits. And the reason I use neurodiverse or neurodivergent is because I feel that it covers a wide range of people. And then when you're talking about people with physical health needs, because again, that's a completely different area. I've got scoliosis of the spine, so I would come under that category as well, but I'm not a wheelchair user all the time. So I think it just depends on, I'd say, be guided by the audience themselves. Like, too often we speak over people and we think we're being kind and we think that we're you know, doing people a favour, but actually we're not. We're mollycoddling them and disempowering them.
Great, thank you. I don't know, Erin and Gloria, if you want, is now a good time to switch? BSL? Yeah? Fab. Let me know when you're ready, Philippa. Great. Okay, so to return to the questions that I went way off there just because I was interested in that particular topic. First question we have is, how does your learning and or additional need impact the way you approach art and your ability to attend cultural events?
Do you want to take that one, Luke? I feel like I spoke quite a lot in the last one.
It's all right. Yeah, so that's a difficult question, a big question. I think in terms of like accessing, I guess, is more just being aware of certain like areas, so kind of being aware that I don't like large crowds or anything like that, so kind of if I'm in an area, I kind of have to acknowledge that I can sort of know that I have a space where I can go away for a bit. And how it approaches art, I honestly not too sure with that one.
I think what you were saying the other day was interesting about how your superpower of empathy is sometimes problematic in those large crowds or busy theatre spaces or busy,
yeah,
because you're trying to take in everybody's personality and that's hard to manage.
Yeah.
And I guess on that, is there something that artists or venues, particularly trying to focus on artists, is there anything that we might be able to do to make that experience easier for you? Is it creating spaces where you can escape?
I would say so, yeah. I'd say having a space where you can just go and kind of switch off, sort of quiet space of any sort, I think's really good. Yeah.
And what about in like in a big theatre setting, you're going to see like a musical or something, and there's hundreds of people in the audience. Are there ways in which we can make that experience easier? Because you're sort of stuck with that crowd for the 2 hours that the show's on.
Yeah. I suppose with that one, it's just kind of, I suppose, making sure I know where everything is, so in case I do really need to get out, and making sure I'm usually making sure I'm with people, because that I find that helps as well. If I'm with people I know, that kind of takes the edge off everything else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, were you going to say something else? Then?
You go ahead.
I think, like, for myself, like, accessing art has been more about people's attitudes towards me rather than the art itself. Because I did a drama and English degree at Queen Mary University, and I was the only neurodiverse person in that group. And as an 18-year-old at the time, it was challenging for me to manage myself and understand what was going on with myself, but then to be able to articulate that to other actors who had no experience of my condition or any understanding of how to support me with it. So we kind of learnt together what the best way to approach things was and how to like navigate meltdowns and stuff, because I was having a lot of meltdowns at that age, whereas like I don't have them so much now because I can manage it. But I think the nicest thing for me recently about helping me to access art was people actually just asking me what my access needs were. Like, I never had that experience in the past where like Open Theatre do this very well. They have a document that they send out to all performers, all artists, anyone working with them. What are your access needs? What do you need support with? And they try and put that in place. And for those who can't answer it, they've got creative enablers to support people to work through that document as well. So like just the being asked, and we were invited to a relaxed performance at the Birmingham Hippodrome of Sleeping Beauty, and just the fact that those things exist are putting us in the right direction. I think the arts are leading the way for access and for the rest of the employment sector to catch up with us, I think.
Great. Colia, I don't know if I've pronounced your name wrong, I'm really sorry, but she's asked who's starting this conversation about access needs. I guess that's a question I sort of have, is how as an artist do I ask you for that information, I guess, particularly if you've not booked a ticket through my ticketing system, you've gone to a venue or you've gone to City of Culture for the events that are happening through this year. How is the best way, I guess, to ask about those access needs? Or is this something we're expecting you as people who need those access requirements to take upon yourself? Where does that begin, I guess?
I think this is something that Open Theatre have only literally just started experimenting with ourselves recently. And we created a document that's called an Access Rider document, and it's literally, I can ask Richard's permission if we can share an example of that with people after this, if people feel that that would be helpful to them for their own projects. But it was basically a template that covered everything right from, you know, do you prefer to work evenings or afternoons? Are you dealing with physical pain in the morning? What medication do you take? That sort of thing. And it's really quite thought-provoking, because for me as an artist and creative, I'd never thought how my own condition impacts my physical ability to actually perform until I was asked those questions by Richard. So I think that's something that all theatre companies could aim to adopt, really.
And yeah, it's worth us all having to think about how we include audiences in that as well. So that's really fantastic. Performers or members of Hijinks or members of Open Theatre, that's a really useful tool, but it's how we ask audiences of that. And something that has popped up in all of the sessions so far is the question, what do you need? In the very first session, somebody was talking about how, I think it was Amira was talking about how she starts every rehearsal process with asking the people in the room, what do you need today? And it might change every day and it might be different every day, but it felt like a really useful sentence to take forward. And it sort of feels like that is coming out in this as well, is what do you need is the starting point of all of this.
I think that's really great, because I think also it doesn't just apply to people with physical health, mental health, additional needs, neurodiverse, whatever. I think it applies to, we're talking about being human, because say if you've done, I don't know, you've done 45-minute slots, you've done 8 performances that day, you're a bit knackered on the 7th one, may you need a chair to sit down in before the warm-up, you know, it's just being mindful of our own human experience and how we as a society are more able to express what we need individually.
Great. I'm going to move on to another question, just because I want to open it up to the floor as well. For any questions they might have. I see some in the chat. One of the questions we talked about earlier in the week was what independent artists can do, or small organizations can do, to make their work more accessible to neurodivergent or autistic audiences. And we particularly, let's focus in, if you had an unlimited budget of multi-million pounds, what would the sort of goal day standard be? And then I guess after that, if you had £100, what do you do? What are you able to achieve on that budget? Luke, I don't know if you want to go first.
Wow. If I had like an unlimited
pounds to spend, Luke. Spending.
Sorry?
You've got millions of pounds to spend.
Millions. So if I had millions, I would do a lot. I think to make it more accessible, I think it's taken us, maybe taking a, I don't know whether it's the right way of putting it, but kind of taking a step back and kind of going, well, how can kind of, because I think sometimes in order to kind of make things more accessible, you kind of have to almost reinvent it. So I think the idea is taking what we all know about performance and kind of saying, well, to make it more accessible. I think I don't really know. I know what I want to say, I just can't really get it out. Sorry.
We go to Maddie, and then if you can have a little time to process your thought.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
I've done a weird thing, and I think I've gone into Luke's head, so correct me if I'm wrong, Luke, but what I think Luke was alluding to was, if you have hundreds and thousands of pounds, then you almost have to start again, and you have to start with access in mind. So I would build a completely fully access.
Yeah, I think it's kind of about like because where theatre, I suppose, started, there was no access. It was just this very straightforward, almost, and I don't mean, for lack of a better word, quite narrow-minded. I don't mean that. I think that's just how it was back then. And I think because of the way the world has changed, with all of this, access and people becoming more open and more understanding, I think with all this unlimited amount of money, you could essentially, like what Maddie just said, and what I've been trying to say, completely start again from scratch, but with more access and more an open mind, an open way of thinking, completely from the get-go, basically.
So we're talking about wider spaces, so that wheelchairs can actually get through the doorways. We're talking about ramps. We're talking about not thousands of seats all crammed in together, but personally I've enjoyed the social distancing, because I've enjoyed people staying away from me, so it would be apart from each other, so that people could actually move around freely and not cramming people into capacity, but rather focusing on the quality of the space and the quality of the like interactions that you have with audiences in that room, rather than thinking about how much money you're going to make from selling however many capacity of tickets that you're selling.
And then I guess the flip side is, now you've got £100. How do you make that work? What can you do on a minimal budget, or what steps can you take to make it a little bit more accessible, particularly to people who are neurodivergent or autistic?
Take theatre outside. Why do you have to spend any money at all? Get communities together. Like, we forget a lot of the time that in Shakespeare's time, theatre started with gypsies and travelling shows and puppeteers and storytelling. So if you only had £100, well, I'd get one of those mini iPod speaker systems and some power, and just do it and crack on with it.
Collier has put in the chat, if you ask 14 people in this room what to do to improve accessibility in the arts, you might get 14 different answers depending on different lived experiences of neurodivergence and/or other disability. The main point is to be open and willing to start that conversation around access needs, brackets, yes, Ben and Madeleine, as an organiser, and let neurodivergent and disabled creatives and audiences to focus on the arts rather than having to focus on their own conditions.
Yeah.
It's exhausting, close brackets. And I guess taking that on a little bit, and I guess now bleeding into the Q&A, so Ben and Gareth, please feel free to join in as well. I don't know if is now a good time to switch the. Is that?
I completely agree with that.
Last one.
Okay, we're just hold on just a second, Maddie. We're just going to switch the BSL interpreters one more time.
Do you mind if I just elaborate on Collier's point there?
Yeah.
I think as a society, we tend to get fixated on labeling things and describing things, and I think as artists, it's our job to do what we've always done and make art, but we need to just be mindful of being as welcoming and as inclusive as we possibly can, rather than making it a tick box system about, or now we need to include this, now we need to include that, now we need to include the other. We just need to do the work we've always done, but try and welcome as many different types of audience members as we can.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like Ben, in what you were saying earlier, we spoke a little bit about communication earlier, but it sort of feels that you have to semi-pick your battles a little bit, in that you were saying that show's never going to be a relaxed performance because it's not in the nature of the show, and the show sort of doesn't work in those conditions. But what felt really important to that is that you were telling people that is the situation, so that they weren't coming into that experience expecting it relaxed, and you weren't able to sort of make that happen. So you were communicating that, and like we've been saying, signage feels really important as well to that. Don't know if you want to open that up a little bit more, because I was just thinking about that with Collier's comment, like you get 14 different answers depending on the individual's requirements, and so it's hard to cater for all 14 of them, I guess.
Yes, but I think it's people appreciate the conversation about and honesty, you know, and openness to be able to be contacted. And I think if you extend that, you know, then you learn more about that particular person and what they might need to access your performance, and you know your own performance. You can make a call on whether you think you can provide that as part of the performance. And some things are, you know, are incredibly easy often, that you just haven't occurred to you. I've had, like, Mission Control, for example. It was a long journey, you know, all the way through this stadium to get somewhere, and clearly that's going to be very difficult for someone with mobility issues. They may need to take the weight off their feet occasionally. So we quickly realized that a simple solution would be to provide, you know, regular seating available for those that may need to sit down at points. And it's just really simple stuff like that often, but it took a test run of the performance to realize how tiring that would be for some individuals, and then get some feedback on it. And I guess it's just to kind of try to ensure that you're always open to being able to having those conversations. But yes, if the question is more about the content of a production, like, and often we'd have, you know, parents, for example, you know, is this appropriate for my 8-year-old? Well, you know, there's this word and that word in there. It's your call. If you think that's appropriate, then you're that person, that child's parent. So it's things like that. But because we're generally open to fielding those sorts of questions, whether it's about access or the age limit or anything, that if the result of that conversation is still that actually maybe we can't make this work for you, or maybe the content of the production isn't appropriate for you, then, you know, that's okay. I guess like I was saying earlier, it's the line between, is it a taste thing about the content, or is it an access provision that we can provide? And I think you have to do everything that you possibly can do to provide that access provision. But if it's down to a taste thing, then of course there's nothing that you can do about that. Once the show has been created, it is the show it is.
And Ben, when people have particular access requirements and they come to Hijinks, is there a person they approach, or what is the way in which they have that conversation with you, I guess?
It comes in a variety of ways, I guess. We always have our contact information on our marketing, so it might come through our info email account, but often it comes via box office inquiries. So box office, if an audience member makes an inquiry to a box office, they will then forward that on to us, and they would contact us directly to have a conversation with that individual audience member.
Great.
And it is because, as Collier says, it could be, there's many different needs that a particular audience member may have in connection to a production. But we do our best to, to have those conversations with as many people who wish to ask us questions on a production. If they have a particular question about access, of course, we're open to that.
Great. I've just got to, I know Luke and Maddie have got to dash. I did forget, but Luke has just reminded in the chat. They're running across town to be part of a performance with Open Theatre. So
can I just say I really enjoyed listening to you both. It was really insightful, and I'm a big fan of Open Theatre. You are, involved in a company that's one of the absolute beacons for working in the field that we work. So yeah, lovely to meet you.
Thank you so much, and
Thank you.
I've enjoyed listening to everything you guys have had to say as well, and it's so refreshing to hear somebody talk about access in a no-nonsense sort of way. So I'm sensing we need a road trip to Cardiff at some point.
Yeah.
We've already started planning it in the chat, so we've got 4 people signed up for that Coventry trip to Cardiff. We'll be over. Thanks so much, Luke, Maddie. I know you've got a dash, so feel free to jump off. And thanks again so much for today.
Thank you.
That's no problem. If anybody does have any questions or wants to contact me or Luke, then we've provided. Paul, did you send out the artist bios? Where did they end up going?
I think
people can contact us that way.
I think Jenny's put them out on the social medias, but when we release this video, I'll put your Twitter handles or whatever it is you want to put for people to get in touch with you in the YouTube chat below, in the text box below, and also any sort of resources or links to Ben's video. If you're happy to pass them over, then I can put them in and you can have a watch of them. Yes, thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Right.
So just to say before everybody else dashes off, we continue this program for the next 7 weeks, I think. We've got next week we've got a session on deaf audiences, capital D, lowercase d, deaf audiences, and that will be featuring Rinku Barpaga, who is a deaf comedian and theatre maker. He's made a show about racism within the deaf community, which was great. And we'll also be joined by Miss Philippa Cross to talk about Talking Birds work alongside the Difference Engine and their work with the deaf communities elsewhere. So please do join that. We've also just launched the video from the first week of which was a panel discussion on what are the barriers to culture and how do we Break Them, which was a really interesting conversation as well. So that's on our YouTube channel. And just finally to say a huge thank you to all of the speakers today. It's been such an insightful experience, and I know I've learned a lot, and I hope people watching at their homes have also learned a lot from it. So thank you very much to Maddie and Luke from Open Theatre, and Ben and Gareth from Hijinks.